Hello, BookTube. I've got a little bit of mail for you today. A very variable day. Sorry for the inconsistent lighting in today's videos. I'm sure it's a nightmare. The weather outside is very variable. I think it's going to get first windy and then a little chilly, and then a massive amount of something. If we were doing a blob watch for this video, there's a massive blob headed to the eastern seacoast. I have no idea how it manifests itself, but I'm hoping that it isn't late in the season snow. I'm hoping that at the very least it's rain. But it's inconsistent inside as well, if I could use an English major parallelism, because this place is just in upheaval. Just in upheaval. You wouldn't think it, because David Murphy was just here. He was here for a week. He went through, it was the patience of a saint. He went through my tech marvelously. Just marvelously. Cleaned all the devices that I actually used, figured out all the devices that I am not actually going to use, and why. Did massive updates, all sorts of things that I just don't know how to do. It was amazing. It was just amazing. He did a lot in that regard. There was so much tech that he didn't actually manage to do that to any of my tablets. I think he would largely have skipped doing it with all of my Chromebooks because they're sort of self-explanatory. You know what you're getting with Chrome. But the tablets, who knows what wonders he could have worked, and also how many he could have eliminated from any kind of consideration. Next time he could do that. And we also did a huge amount of book rearranging. We rearranged 2 whole sections out in the other room. 2 big sections, biography and books about books, are now under complete control. For the moment. But the rest of the place, oh no. 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 There were too many John Wayne clips to watch. We didn't ever get to the rest of the place. And I have been chafing at that ever since, so you can see the books on the floor, their books, and everything's a mess. and the weather outside is very, very inconsistent. I think tomorrow will be pretty cold, pretty chilly, and pretty windy. I think Friday will be nice and sunny and clear, and then I think at the weekend we start days of very variable weather where I won't know for sure whether I'm taking my little baby out in the rain or the sleet or what. But the mail still comes through. There is some mail, so we will go over it. A wide variety of packages here. We have one of those big white envelopes. We have a box, and we also have a manila envelope that's all floppy, like there's more than one thing in it. So let's start with this white thing, since I've got it in my hand, and see what we can find for mail. I don't really have any desires at the moment. There's nothing really burning that I want out there. What have we got here? Looks like a novel. This comes out in mid-June. This is by Robin Sloan, and it is called Moonbound. Oh, this is by the author of Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore. That was a huge hit, right? This is a book by that author, Moonbound. Looks a little odd. It looks like it's indie published, but this is Farrar, Straus and Giroux. This is not indie. Robin Sloan's fiction has always been a place where the very new and the very old come together in strange and wonderful ways. The author's biggest and most ambitious work to date is no exception. But whereas his previous books have unfolded in the interstitial zones where the world we know starts to feel just a little bit magical, Moonbound leaps into the fantastical and 11,000 years forward in time. Well, how interesting. It reads like a fantasy epic out of the distant past, except it is set in the distant future. There are wizards, but not in the way you might expect. There are dragons, but dragons that have more in common with artificial intelligence and high-dimensional math than fire-breathing reptiles. There are talking beavers, and a record-keeping fixation. Actually, the beavers are a little complicated to get into here. Okay, I'm liking this so far. I'm very much. I will definitely read this in June, although I want to point out the beavers in this world also talk. Okay? Just because you can't understand them. Anyway, in 11,000 years, humans have had a chance to live multiple futures. There has been a good one, in which we've devised brilliant solutions to formidable global challenges, and another future, a monstrous one, in which a dark force has spread its wings over the land and technologies we've created have slipped out of our control. Balanced between these two futures is a child on a difficult journey, as he pieces together cryptic clues to the truth about who he is. All of this is, of course, narrated for us by a technologically altered sentient fungus. I tend to view most fiction writers that way. As a survivor of the past, they are somehow the perfect entity to tell this sprawling tale, capturing the drama of our adventurous journey against a more omniscient understanding of its place in time and history. I really like the idea of a book set so far in the future that there are multiple futures that have happened, not just one. That's kind of neat. I was not the world's biggest fan of Mr. Penumba's 24-hour bookstore. I know a lot of you love it. A lot of readers love it. Oh my God, it's a book club staple. I didn't love it all that much. I didn't dislike it, but this sounds fascinating. So great, fantastic. All right, so that's coming out for June. All right, let's do the floppy manila thing. I'm pretty sure this is more than one book. That's got to be the reason for it. Unless someone's sending me a puppy. There is no rule number one against sending me a puppy, but don't you do it. Don't you do it. Let's see. Get the paperwork off this so that we're not losing track of it. Is this an invoice? Ooh, gross. It is. It's an invoice. All right, well, I need not have worried. I'm not going to be bothering with an invoice. Let's get that out of the way as well. And see what we have here. All right, so we've got packaging all done. And there are indeed 2 books from the folks at Basic Books. Fantastic. Basic Books have been doing so good. Well, you've all agreed with me because we've been watching them together. They've been so good. Their nonfiction titles in the last few months have been so good. What have we got here? Oh, my. Their streak continues. All right, this comes out in September. Finished copies in September. So that's a long time from now. A long, punishing summer. David and I, when he was here, one of the things that we were just routinely going back to, we had beautiful weather. The whole time he was here, we had beautiful weather. But he had a nightmare summer last summer. The upper Midwest was crushed under a heat dome. Boston was not. But the rest of the country was. And Boston has had its heat domes in the past. We were both routinely recurring to just this morbid speculation about how bad this summer is going to be. Not a question anymore. It's like I was telling him. On one of my many diatribes, I believe we were on the road, and I'm pretty sure that he was asleep. But it's like I was telling him. For all of our lives, we would all look at the summer and think, summer will probably be hot, probably a few 90-degree days, pretty bad. But we didn't look at the summer. We didn't look ahead to the summer the way we all do now, which is, are we going to die? Are roadways going to collapse from the heat? Are hundreds of people going to die? But anyway, this comes out when that's all over with. This is coming out in September. Oh my, this is by Sean McMeekin. We'll get into him. And this is To Overthrow the World, The Rise and Fall of Communism. Oh man. Basic Books continues to do this. It's incredible. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, how many of you remember that? How many old people do I have listening to me? And the collapse of the USSR, many Americans and Europeans celebrated what they believed to be the death of communism. Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. Francis Fukuyama proclaimed the end of the Cold War in 1991 to be the end of history. And in 2001, Richard Pipes described his book, Communism, A History, as both an introduction to communism and its obituary. But today, as the United States' global dominance wanes in the resurgence of Russia's military power and China's economic cultural influence, got any receipts for that waning, bub? Communism once again looms large as many communist policies once thought to be taboo infiltrate Western democratic nations. Infiltrating the stupid, unwashed vape heads in Harvard's undergraduate class is not the same thing as infiltrating the government. Award-winning author Sean McMeekin, whose book, Stalin's War, is incredible. You should read it. Absolutely, you should. Great to have another book by him. Provides a historical overview of communism here. Beginning with the schools of thought that influenced the development of communist philosophy, from Plato to Christianity to Rousseau, the author explores the origins of Karl Marx's world-changing ideas. He shows that communism in Russia, China, and its satellites, culminating in tyrannical regimes led by figures such as Stalin and Mao, emerged only after a series of world wars rent the social fabric and put lethal weapons into the hands of thousands of angry, impressionable young men. Right. I heard all of this during the Cold War. Thank you. For decades and decades, I heard all of this. That communism works just fine. It's just every implementation of it that's ever been tried that doesn't work. But it works just fine. Communism is a political system. It is necessarily going to be implemented by humans. Granted, it utterly rules bee society, but they can't talk about it. So if you're saying that this would work if only a non-human species implemented it, well, then it doesn't work. But anyway, let's see here. And besides, I'm rather fond of angry, impressionable young men. Please don't blame them. After the fateful 1989 events in Berlin and Tiananmen Square, communism seemed to be going dormant until a surprising rebound of communist ideas in the early 21st century. By tracing the history of communism across its heights and depths, the author argues that although the party claims to speak for the proletariat masses, it can only succeed in securing power through force. I think this should go to David Murphy. Don't you? I think I should send this to him. And maybe the finished copy as well. Fantastic. That's a new Sean McMeekin book. That's just fantastic. And then what's the other one that's in here? Can we top that? That was pretty good. We can. We can top that. For this crowd, we can top that. This comes out in late May. Oh my God. This is by Adam Smith, but not David's Adam Smith. He spells it Smyth. And this will definitely top that for all of you. This is The Bookmakers, a history of the book in 18 lives. One of the most lasting, recognizable, and iconic human innovations is the book. Even in our increasingly digitized culture, the print book endures not only as a method of conveying information, but as an object of beauty, one that has continued to adapt to new context across its 550-year history. Tell me you're not sold on this already. In this book, Professor Adam Smith takes readers on an international journey of the book's evolution through history, including introducing us to the familiar and forgotten people who revolutionized the technology behind one of our oldest inventions. Who will the people be? Can we guess ahead of time before we read on? Gutenberg has to be one of them. Well, let's see. Beginning with the early printed books made by Dutch immigrant Wynkyn van Word. Okay. All right, fine. You're trying to dethrone Gutenberg? Aldus Manutius has got to be in here as well. You're going to dethrone him as well? What about Erasmus? Let's just see. That's in 1490s London. This book tells the story of the book through 18 biographical portraits. It begins in 1490s London. And way in the back of the crowd, the Chinese have their hands up now saying, you're starting history of the book in 1490s London? Let's see. 18 biographical portraits. What a great way to do this. What a great way. Oh, man. These are both fantastic. Along the way, we meet typographer John Baskerville and Sarah Eves in the 18th century Birmingham. We explore the history of collaged cut-and-paste Bibles dating back to the 1630s and look behind the scenes at Black Mass Publishing in 2023 New York City. From binding to papermaking, typography to illustrations, and libraries to small presses, the author demonstrates the role of human agency in evolution of technology. Okay. All right. This is just a pub sheet. This sounds like a fascinating book. But the history of bookmaking in the Western world, if we're starting in 1490s London, is 99.9% cis-het white men. 99.9%. If this book's biographical portraits starting in 1490s London don't reflect that, then this book is trying to create alternate history. Could still be very interesting. If the author tries to do that, we'll get portraits, the biographical portraits. How many were there here? 18? 18 biographical portraits. If the author tries to do that, alternate history, there is no alternate history. History happened in only one way. And the history of the book in the Western world until the modern era, when there are huge numbers of other people involved. But the history of the book in the modern era is the same thing as the history of commerce in the modern era or war in the modern era. If you're starting in 15th century London, it's the history of cis-het white men. I don't like that any more than you do. But saying that's not true, and that, it's just racists who's been telling you that all this time, and that actually the pioneering figures involved. If this book doesn't concentrate on Gutenberg, then this book is not doing its subject justice. But even so, even if it doesn't do its subject justice, those biographical portraits could still be really interesting. There will be, like for instance, what was her name? Sarah Eves. I'm sure that I don't know anything about her. I'm sure that she's turned up in a couple of histories of printing that I have as a name. Maybe not even meriting an index notion. Here, I bet she gets her own portrait, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I just hope, it's just my usual complaint. I hope that this isn't proselytizing. That's not Anyway, let's continue. As skeptics continue to question the longevity of the print book in the 21st century, the author looks past to show how the current relationship between print and digital mirrors other watershed media shifts in history, demonstrating the book's constant resilience in the face of change. This book celebrates the book as an icon that is always, past, present, and future, at the heart of human culture. Okay, I certainly agree with that, but it's not a false comparison to draw, but it might not be completely illustrative. It is so much easier to get and read and carry and keep and use a digital book. That is so much easier. And that wasn't true of the printed book in any of its previous eras. I mean, look at, for instance, one of those upheavals. I'm sure it'll be in this book. One of those upheavals was people wringing their hands about, will these cheap paperback books that are suddenly flooding the market, will they spell the end of real books, what people called real books? The reason that those cheap paperbacks were flooding the market is because they were so much easier. They were just so much easier. Hardcover books didn't go away, and I'm sure they won't now. But that's the reason here. Anyway, let's find out about the author. He is a professor of English literature and the history of the book at Oxford. And he's a regular contributor to the London Review of Books and the Times Literary Supplement. And he also runs the 39 Steps Press, a small printing press which he keeps in a barn in Oxfordshire. Okay, so he's got skin in the game. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Oh my. Do we dare to look at the table of contents? And see? Oh, the table of contents is going to give us, all right. Okay, so from 1603, Mary and Anna Collett. William Wildgoose, Wynkyn de Worde, John Baskerville, Benjamin Franklin, Nicholas Robert, Charlotte and Alexander Sutherland, Edward Moody, Charles Edward Moody. Fantastic. Oh, some of these are going to be fun to read on their own. For small presses, we have Nancy Cunard, and there's a whole chapter on zines. Great. Absolutely great. I'm sure this is an advanced copy, so the index will not be in place yet. Yeah, the index is not in place. Okay, well, that all sounds absolutely fascinating. I'm going to want to know what interests this author to tell me about it. And this isn't, keep in mind, it's a history of the book in 18 lives. So a lot is going to depend on that prepositional phrase. This is not a history of the book if it does not highlight Gutenberg. Obviously. I should hope that would go without saying. But it could be a history of these bookish people, which would make it great on its own right. I mean, you're obviously going to want to pre-order this, or at least make sure your library knows about this, and Sean McMeekin. But actually, I could be saying that about almost anything in Basic Books' last two catalogs, the whole catalogs. There's a presiding genius going on there that I like very much. Then we'll move on to the box and finish up. We've got a box. It's got a little bit of heft to it. It could be a finished copy. And then we'll be done with this mail haul. No, it's not a finished copy. It's an advanced copy. Oh my. This is a good mail haul. All right, this is from the folks at Princeton University Press. This doesn't come out until August. OMG, this is going to get reviewed everywhere. If I have anything to say about it, it's going to get reviewed everywhere. This is by Benjamin Nathans, and it is called To the Success of Our Hopeless Causes, The Many Lives of the Soviet Dissident Movement. Incredible. Incredible. All right, let's see what we have here. This is a gripping history of the Soviet dissident movement, which hastened the end of the USSR and still provides a model of opposition in Putin's Russia, where he hunts them for sport. Incredible. What must have gone into making this book? Beginning in the 1960s, the Soviet Union was unexpectedly confronted by a dissident movement that captured the world's imagination. Demanding that the Kremlin obey its own laws, an improbable band of Soviet citizens held unauthorized public gatherings, petitioned in support of arrested intellectuals, circulated banned Samizdat text. Soviet authorities arrested dissidents, subjected them to bogus trials and vicious press campaigns, sentenced them to psychiatric hospitals and labor camps, sent them into exile, and transformed them into martyred heroes. Against all odds, the dissident movement undermined the Soviet system and unexpectedly hastened its collapse. Taking its title from a toast made at dissident gatherings, "To the success of our hopeless cause," is a definitive history of the remarkable group of people who helped to change the 20th century. Steve is in love. The author's vivid narrative tells the dramatic story of the men and women who became dissidents, from Nobel laureates Andrei Sakharov and Alexander Solzhenitsyn to many others who are virtually unknown today. Drawing on diaries, memoirs, personal letters, interviews, and KGB interrogation records. How did you get hold of those? To the success of our hopeless cause reveals how dissidents decided to use Soviet law to contain the power of the Soviet state. This strategy, as one of them put it, was, quote, simple to the point of genius. In an unfree country, they began to conduct themselves like free people, close quote. I didn't mean for anything to steal the thunder of basic books, but oh my. All right, who is the author? Benjamin Nathans. That name sounds familiar. He's the author of Beyond the Pale, The Jewish Encounter with Late Imperial Russia. Didn't I just find a copy of that book? Formica Cummins? Not on BookTube anymore? I thought I did. Who is he, though? He's a professor of history at the University of Pennsylvania. Okay. Well, I mentioned this comes out in August. I mentioned the whole rigmarole of either pre-ordering it if you want to help the author, or getting your library to make sure your library knows about this. Make sure that they know that this is coming out and that you're going to want to read it. I'm certainly going to want to read it. Oh my. All right. Well, that's how we do a mail haul in Mother Russia. We have To the Success of Our Hopeless Cause, a history of Soviet dissident movements. We have To Overthrow the World, the new book by Sean McMeekin, and really that's enough. I mean, it sounds fascinating, a history of communism and how it's not quite dead, but really just saying it's the new Sean McMeekin book is enough. That ought to be enough. If you've read Stalin's War, and if you haven't read Stalin's War, go to your nearest charity shop or thrift store or used bookstore and buy a copy and read it. Then The Bookmakers by Adam Smith, a collection of profiles of very, very bookish people over the last 5 centuries. And finally, Moonbound by Robin Sloan, the author of Mr. Penumbra, which a lot of you really liked. So we have a little fiction thrown in here, but it's science fiction, it's science fantasy. And then lots of history. Great. Fantastic. So that's not a bad mail haul. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead here, so I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.